Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is June 6th, 2023, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? I think most of you already heard the news from Novakhovka. The Russians blew up the dam, being the idiots that they are, and I don't even want to hear any arguments saying that this was perhaps Ukraine's doing. We all know that the Russians were in control of this dam ever since the beginning of the conflict. They had the incentive of doing this, especially because the Ukrainians have been picking up initiatives in the Zaporizhia front and having some success. So for them, it seemed to be a no-brainer to blow it up, but they didn't think about the long-term consequences that this has brought, not only to the Ukrainian people, but also the world and Russia as well. So first of all, there's already reports saying that this is the Russian 205th Motorized Rifle Brigade that took part of this terrorist attack. And essentially, let's hope that we can hunt them down very quickly and eliminate these people, or at least bring to justice the people that have committed this atrocity. Because this, first of all, has massive repercussion on human life. The displacement of entire populations and settlements that are right beside the Dnieper River is going to be huge. We're already seeing a lot of videos of people having to flee because the water is rising up to 3-4 meters high, completely flooding entire homes up to the rooftop. So you can imagine how big of a flood this can be. Also, the destruction of some of the most fertile Ukrainian lands, right? If we're looking at the south of Ukraine, it's the breadbasket of Ukraine. It's flat area. It's the Ukrainian steppes, very, very fertile lands. And a lot of people in Zaporizhia and Kherson and Mykolaiv dependent on this Novakhovka dam to have their canals and other irrigation systems to water their farms. And now that is also a massive risk. So this has massive implications also on countries that depend on Ukraine for their grain. And we're looking at last year when we tried to strike a deal with Russia to have the free passage of Ukrainian ships through the Bosphorus Strait in order to provide these grains to North African countries and other countries that are very reliant on Ukrainian grain. So this has also massive global implications in terms of food supply. Crimea is not going to be getting any fresh water anymore. So that means that this is going to have long-term consequences for the people on the Crimean Peninsula. So they're going to be struggling. So this is essentially Russia saying that they're okay with scorched earth tactics. They're not planning on keeping, or at least, building on the areas that they're currently occupying. Their plan was also to extract as many resources as possible to bring back to their homeland and back in the Kremlin, right? This was it's a centuries-long practice by the Russian elites. And also the wildlife, right? This is an entire ecosystem that is being destroyed by the Russians. The rise of water, the animals having to flee and dying, it's just an absolute catastrophe. And I think that this is the line that the Russians crossed, where there's no going back. At this point, the Russian society will have to go through the same huge reforms that the German people had to during World War II. And there's no better day to talk about it than D-Day, because this was the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany, right? The defeat of Nazi Germany started happening with D-Day, which, required and necessitated a lot of sacrifice from the Allies, but it was done, right? Everybody got it done. And so I think that this is the same thing here now. The Russians are pretty much saying that they're okay with what Putin is doing. And why I'm saying that is because, as I said in yesterday's video, 75% of the Russians are still supporting this special military operation in Ukraine, right? And it seems like even right now on Telegram channels, the Russian people are rejoicing about this and very happy, right? You're seeing images of, Kherson in November 2022 occupied by the Ukrainians, and then Kherson today occupied by beavers, right? They're laughing about this. And yes, I will generalize, because at this point, we can be filtering out, the Russian population into who's good, who's kind of, was silent and quiet, but didn't do anything because they were afraid, who's actually a huge Putin fan and supporter, right? We're not going to have time to deal with this filtering at this point. right? Like we didn't have time to deal with the filtering of the German people post World War II, right? It was just massive reforms. There was a massive division of Germany. And I think the same thing needs to be applied here with Russia. Russia simply cannot be what they are right now, this massive territory, right? Trying to create buffer zones and saying that it's actually them who are trying to attack us, not us, right? So overall, this is the line that they crossed, that there's no going back for the Russian people. They will have to be seriously punished, and they will have to pay massive reparations to the Ukrainian people for decades, and if not centuries, because the destruction that they've brought to Ukraine is long-term and also almost permanent in certain situations. And so I can give you the chronology of the events, because the Russians were not shy to be happy about the fact that they blew up the dam, but only when they realized how much of a catastrophe they actually caused, they started reversing and actually pointing fingers at the Ukrainian government. So it's a great post here by Volodya Tretyak, who kind of followed the pro-Russian Telegram channels and what was discussed there by some prominent channels. And so he says that at 2 o'clock in the morning, the Russians blew up the Kakhovka hydroelectric power station. But I don't want to see how much. It's not very visible. The Russians still think that they have nearly blown up a small part of the HPP and are flooding our military on the islands. 2, the Russian OSINT intelligence community, Rybar, picks up the thesis and says a small area was blown up at 6:51 a.m. Then the mayor of Nova Kakhovka abruptly changes his rhetoric and says there was no explosion. It was shelling by the Ukrainian army, because they realized that the Nova Kakhovka has been completely blown up and the apparent mess became very evident. But the propagandists, who do not know what the hell happened, continue to work according to the methodology and continue to throw into the information space that the dam was previously shelled and then it got a little tired and broke a little bit. Other Telegram channels that cooperate with the military are happily hopping on one leg, cheering because of the undermining of the Kakhovka Dam. The positions of the Ukrainian armed forces on the islands are flooded. So they're very happy at this stage. But the Russians are slowly realizing that they have created a large-scale man-made environmental disaster, almost as large as Chernobyl. And they're starting to reverse. Russian influence on the information space is changing its tone dramatically. And they start, of course, accusing the Ukrainian side of provocations. So again, it's the same steps that Russia always followed, right? Whenever they realize that they've made, a huge mess, they just start pointing fingers at the other side and, spreading a bunch of misinformation in the news media. And then you have some credible news, actually, like we saw with yesterday's video, BBC News picking up some cheap, Russian propaganda and putting on their titles. I don't care what was written in that article, right? People care about titles. And when they read that, oh, well, the Ukrainian offensive was a fail, then, most people don't really read all the paragraphs, right? So that's the big issue here. And that's really reminiscent of what happened also with MH17, right? The Russians, the pro-Russians, the rebels, they thought that they shut down a Ukrainian jet fighter back when the MH17 event happened, catastrophe. And they were happy to claim that they shut down jet fighter. Twitter was all over, saying that Ukrainian jet was destroyed during the anti-terrorist operation that Ukraine was doing at that time. But only when they realized, taking pictures, that it was Malaysia Airlines that they actually destroyed, they completely annihilated a civilian airliner, did they start to retract and blaming the other side, thus the Ukrainians, for shutting down this airplane. So, this is the same chronology we're seeing here. How many times are we going to have to see Russia commit these terrorist acts before the West gives everything possible? Because at this point, we're still talking sometimes about Ukraine, certain countries considering what they can give Ukraine. Like right now, Ukraine is acting as a shield. It's taking the brunt of everything that Russia has. The Russians are doing currently scorched earth tactics. And what worries me as well is the situation with Enerhodar. Their stupidity and their lack of long-term thinking can cause another disaster. And I really hope not. I'm going to knock on wood right now. I really hope that doesn't happen, but another massive disaster of the likes of Chernobyl and Enerhodar, right? Because at this point, it seems like the Russians clearly indicate that they have nothing to lose, that they're completely okay with destroying entire cities, right? Entire settlements, wildlife, fertile land, just the planet, literally. They're okay with destroying the planet for their own ambitions, right? Just to be petty about it. They know they're not going to win this war. They know that they're on the retreat. They know that they're losing this battle against Ukraine and the West. They have nothing else to show anymore, right? Except for this little nuclear threat that they're always constantly reminding the world about. And I know it is a legitimate threat. It is a legitimate threat, especially with events like these. But we know that if Russia uses that, that's the end of Russia and probably the start of a massive global conflict that I don't want to talk about. But Russia also is, I think, very well aware of that consequence. But this doesn't give me confidence either. So it's very disappointing. You know what's also disappointing? The UN, because adding insult to injury, this is one of the worst timed tweets in history, and you can't even give the benefit of the doubt to the United Nations, saying that maybe they didn't hear about this event in Novakakhovka and Kherson, right, and that it was a honest mistake. Okay, but why is this tweet still hasn't been deleted to this day? To this minute, I should say, right? Because it was posted today. Tuesday is Russian Language Day. Follow United Nations RU for updates on the UN's work in Russia. Who gives a crap? Let's face it, the United Nations is a useless institution, and it's a joke, right? It's more of a town hall for countries, right? And I understand its place, but when you're clearly seeing the actions of Russia committing constant terrorist attacks, they have to be kicked out. That doesn't mean that we don't have conversations with Russia and that we're never having negotiations, because at the end of the day, this war also will end on negotiations, on the negotiating table. Right? So there's going to be always a room for talks, but on Ukraine's terms, not on Russia's terms. They still try to bluff us saying that they have, multiple jokers, but Russia has no jokers anymore except for their one little nuclear bomb, threat that they have. That's it. And, we all know that Russian language is all about spreading terrorism, destruction, and death. They've used the Russian language to say that we're protecting the Russian population, the Russian-speaking population. You're a Russophobe, right? You're a Russophobe, so I'll drop a bomb on your city. Or actually, I'll drop millions of bombs on your city because you're a Russophobe. And that's what Russian language is all about. And we need to bring a change to that, and especially the institutions that allow Russia to legitimize itself, like this. Why do we have a United Nations RU? Why are they not kicked out? Why are they even able to post on Twitter? Why is the Russian government still able to post tweets, right? That's a question for Elon Musk. And I think you guys know that his position in the last few months has definitely been more pro-Russian. It's very questionable as to whose side he's on, but it just pisses me off to see stuff like this, and I hope the United Nations will delete this post, but I seriously doubt it. And here you can see, the floods that we're currently witnessing in Kherson. So, entire cities are completely flooded, underwater. The animals, even the zoo, I think in Kherson, or a zoo in the Kherson Oblast, was completely flooded, and all the animals died there because nobody took care of them, obviously, as the water just swept through very quickly. So let's take a look, just to understand. The animals are scared. Absolutely horrific. You can see that the water rose as high as the window, or as high as the very top of the door. It's about, at least 1.5 meters here, 2 meters, rescuing. The Ukrainians right now doing everything possible to rescue, but you can see that it's extremely difficult because of how quickly everything happens. So you just, you can't really prevent this type of situation. And my last comment about this is, unfortunately, this is a result of all the traitors, and that includes the Ukrainian traitors, and the Russian people that allowed Russia to quickly capture the south of Ukraine. But I'm certainly talking more about the Ukrainian traitors. That includes commanders, the people that were in charge that fled to Russia or now, missing in action by a complete hazard. they've caused the pain now of millions of people in the south of Ukraine, destruction of an entire city of Mariupol, Melitopol being occupied, Berdyansk, right? The people are truly struggling, especially the pro-Ukrainian people, right? They have to hide. They have to always live in anxiety. And now their lands are being wiped out by the Russians. And I think that also we can blame a lot on the Russian people. We also shouldn't be forgetting the Ukrainian traitors that allowed this to happen, right? This is the result of that. And I hope that, we often talk about Zelensky being a great president, but he also downplayed the threat very early when talks started. There were talks about this Russian invasion. He downplayed this threat. And I think that we shouldn't forget that, because Zelensky changed his stance very, very late, right before the invasion started. He started understanding that Russia was actually going all in. But we had time to prepare for this, and we did not do it, right? That includes the West, to understand that Russia overall is a threat to the entire planet, literally. Because if they're capable of doing this and they're okay with that, then sky's the limit. Because if we don't have a strong response to Russia in the next few days, you can bet that Putin will have nothing to lose, right? He'll have this mentality that, look, I got a slap in the wrist again, where I consider to what NATO could do. NATO should be sending all the goddamn weapons they have. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but you guys understand what I'm trying to say here. NATO, all the allies of Ukraine, should be doing everything possible. Whatever Ukraine asks, don't even ask any questions. Give it to Ukrainian people, because we're going to get it done, but we need the help of everyone that is an ally of Ukraine. Otherwise, we're going to be handling with these catastrophes every other month. And Russia is going to be completely fine burning down entire cities, leveling them, flooding them, nuking them even. And then you know what's next. So that's the video for today, guys. I'm absolutely shocked, and I have no words. But you know what? Let's stay strong. Let's continue helping Ukraine. Subscribe to this channel if you guys want to get more news updates. And again, I appreciate your support, not only for this channel, but really the most important is your support for the Ukrainian cause to just win. Because this war has not been... It's been a while since we had a black and white war where you clearly know who's on the good side and who's on the bad side, right? Last time when it was that clear, it was World War II. So Ukraine needs to win, and thank you for your help, and I will see you guys in the next time. Thank you.